key concept is that phenotype is affected by many different factors. So remember what phenotype is? You know, it's what you see, it's what you observe. So you have genotype, it's the kind of genes you have. Phenotype would be the expression of those genes. It's what you can observe in the person. So the things that we see in the person, the traits that they have, it's not just one gene that affects them. For example, you can't just point to one gene that gives you hair color. You have several genes that work together to give you a certain hair color. Or eye color. You have 3 different genes that contribute to eye color. Skin color, there's 6 genes that affect your skin color. So that's how almost every trait you can think of is in your body. It's not just one gene for a trait. It's several genes working together that gives you a wide variety of different traits. That's why we have a wide variety of skin colors. It's a spectrum of skin colors. We don't just have 3 different colors of skin. We have lots of different skin colors. We have lots of shades of skin colors. That's due to all the different genes that can affect skin color. Phenotype can depend upon interactions of alleles. So remember what alleles are. They're just different kinds of genes. And so different genes together can impact the kind of traits you see in a person. There's different ways this can happen. One way is called incomplete dominance. That's when both genes are expressed, but neither one is dominant over the other. They both have somewhat of an expression. So the best way to explain this would be to look at carnations. And so there's basically 3 different traits you can see in a carnation. You can see red, and that's if they have 2 genes for red. You can see white carnations, that's if you have 2 genes for white. If a carnation has a gene for red and a gene for white, they're pink. And so incomplete dominance would be when you have both genes expressed partially. You have a mixture of those 2 genes. So this goes against what Mendel observed. You know, in pea plants, what did Mendel see? He saw red or white. He never saw a mixture of those 2 traits. So he didn't know at the time this could happen, but now we have observed that there are some genes that can mix. Now, it's not for every gene. Most genes don't do this, but some genes can do this, where you have a mixture of traits, not either or. So it partially goes against Mendel, but not fully, because Mendel is still correct that you have 2 genes and you have 1 of each. So in a carnation that's pink, it still has a red and a white gene. And so you only have 2 possibilities. You either have a red gene or a white gene. But if you have both red and white genes, then you have pink in the carnation. But what Mendel observed is that you only would have red or white. The other possibility is codominance. In codominance, both genes are expressed completely. So codominant genes are not dominant or recessive. So you see both genes expressed. Example of that would be the very bottom left picture, where you can see that the flower has both red and white parts to it. So it's not a mixture of traits. It's not like the pink, where you had the red and the white mixed. They're both expressed, just in different areas.
Would you get different shades of brown from the incomplete dominance?
Different shades?
Yeah. Is that how it works? Because there are a lot of different shades of brown.
Oh, shades of brown?
Yeah, brown hair. Sorry.
Oh, brown hair. Okay. So those are all different. So we're talking just about flowers in this case, but for humans and also other animals too, there's usually several genes that contribute to that color. And so that's what we're really seeing in humans. And for brown versus blonde hair in a human, what you see is not incomplete dominance. What you see is several genes together, working together. That's what creates hair color. And so in a way, it's incomplete dominance, but it's not just having two genes, that brown or blonde hair. It's actually having several genes together that give you different shades of brown. Does that make sense? You have several genes. If you have 6 genes, you'd have the darkest, like probably better for skin color than anything else, but for skin color, there are 6 genes. If they're all expressed, you have the darkest skin possible. If you have 5 of the 6 expressed, you have dark skin, but not the darkest skin. 3 genes expressed out of 6, you have lighter skin, and so on. So that's a better way to explain what happens to your hair color too. If you add genes, you can get, it's kind of like having paint. You know, if you add more of a color to the paint, then you get a different color blend. So it is incomplete dominance in your hair, but it's just not simple as saying 2 genes are expressed. There's several genes that either are turned on or turned off, and they combine to give you different color hair. So we could say incomplete dominance, but just know that it's several genes working together that gives you that trait, not just 1 or 2 genes. Yeah.
Are those for flowers all the same type of flower?
No, they're not the same type of flower. They're just showing you that in certain flowers, you can see codominance versus incomplete dominance, but these are different flower types. In humans, codominance is best explained in blood type. So in blood type, A and B are codominant, which means if you have both A and B genes, you have blood type AB, where you have both A and B expressed. So last semester, we talked about this briefly, where if you have blood type A, it means you have a certain antigen on the blood cell. It's a protein marker that advertises its blood type to other cells. So blood type A gives you an antigen, which you can see on the blood cell surface. It's a blue sphere. Blood type B gives you a different antigen, which you can see as an orange dot. And so if you have blood type A, you have a gene that codes for the antigen that gives you blood type A. Blood type B, a different antigen that gives you blood type B. If you have AB, you have both antigens expressed. And then blood type O really meant 0, as in 0 antigens. You don't have either on your blood. So at the very bottom is note, many genes have more than 2 alleles. Like you see for blood type, there are 3 different possible alleles. You have A, B, and O. So there are many genes that have more than 2 possibilities. In fact, there are other blood types too we haven't talked about, like blood type H, for example, which is very rare, but it is a possible blood type too. So there are more than just these 4 blood types, but these are the most common by far blood types. Polygenic traits. This is when you have 2 or more genes that give you a certain trait. And so Hannah asked earlier about incomplete dominance. It's better to call hair color polygenic trait than incomplete dominance, because it's really what's happening with things like hair color, eye color. You have several genes working together that gives you a certain shade of color in the body. So we have a wide variety of eye colors. And the reason why we do is because we have several genes that contribute to eye color. So we have 3 general colors of eye: brown, green, and blue. And basically 3 genes that contribute to eye color. Brown dominates over green and blue. Green is dominant over blue, and blue is recessive to all of those colors. So three different genes contribute to eye color, and they're called BE, BAY1, BAY2, and then GEY for green versus blue, BEY for brown versus blue. Yes. No, I don't remember the chart. Just the idea, just write down the order of dominance, the brown, green, and blue, but don't worry about the different genes.
I always thought blue is more dominant. I think green is the rare
color. So rare doesn't mean recessive. You can have a really rare trait, but it could be dominant over others. So it's not always the case that the rarest trait is recessive. It usually is, but not always the case. So we can't look at just the rarest trait and say, oh, that must be recessive. Sometimes it's not the case. But yeah, green is a rare color. Brown by far is the most common eye color. Generally, darker colors are dominant over lighter colors. So dark skin, dark hair, dark eyes are dominant over lighter ones. So it's I've simplified this before, and I've talked about how, generally people who have blue eyes have 2 blue eye genes, and they usually can't have a child with brown eyes, but it's possible in certain cases that it does happen. It's just not very common. It's pretty rare. But for the most part, we can think of it as a simple Mendelian trait where brown dominates over blue. And most of the time, people who have brown eyes can carry the gene for blue eyes to their children. They wouldn't have it themselves. And so that's generally how that works, where you can either have homozygous genes, where you have 2 genes for brown eyes, and you only give brown eyes to your children. But because we have 3 genes that contribute to eye color, it gets more complicated than just that. But for most cases, people who have brown eyes will either have brown eyes or green or blue recessive and give those traits to their children. No?
So my dad has blue eyes and my mom has green eyes. So I have brown eyes.
Yeah, and that can happen sometimes. And it's pretty rare that happens, but that does happen sometimes, where even though a dominant brown eyes is not in the parents, that can happen sometimes in the child. It's not very common. It's very, very rare that happens, but it does happen sometimes.
How do you mixture the color different spots?
Yeah, the genes are expressed randomly in certain cases. And so that's what happens, is that the genes are not expressed fully. They're expressed randomly in different spots in the eye. And that's what gives you different colors in the eye. Because it's very common in pretty much every eye color that you see a lot of different colors within the eye.
Yeah. Can a person have blue eyes turn to green eyes and
It's possible, yeah. You can definitely change your eye color over time. Also due to the light will also affect your eye color a lot. But just naturally throughout life, you can have a change in hair color and a change in eye color. That does happen for many people. That can be due to hormonal changes. People who, especially after women have babies, lots of times having a baby will change their hair color. That is fairly common. But not even just that, but just throughout life, your genes can turn off or turn on for different things. And that can change your hair color or your eye color as you get older. So that does happen to people.
So like in that picture, the person with the blue eye with brown in part of it, would they also have a brown gene to make that possible?
Let's see, is it this one right here?
No, the blue eye with brown.
Oh, it's right here?
Yeah. Would they have to have a brown gene to make that?
Yeah, that looks to me like brown, so they would have to have a brown gene. Yeah.
So why was that? If brown's dominant, how would that happen?
Yeah, so it's not as simple, even though really make this very simple. Like this is not exactly, in most cases, what we do see is brown dominant over blue, but not always. That's the short answer to that question. That's why in Camilla's case, that could happen too, where the parents could have green eyes and blue eyes, but give their child brown hair or brown eyes. That happens sometimes. Because it's not a simple Mendelian brown overpowers blue. It's very complicated. That's the short answer to the question, is that the genes work together, but we don't see a complete dominance over a certain eye color. We can see a combination of eye colors because they're not fully dominant over each other.
Can a person actually have like one blue eye and one green eye?
That happens sometimes. Yeah, it's not very common, but that definitely, I've seen people have that before. I know people who have that condition where, yeah, they have a green eye and a blue eye, or brown eye and gray eye. It does happen. You already wrote this down, so don't worry about writing that down again, but skin color is another example of this, where it's several genes that contribute to skin color. What you can see on here, the darkest skin color is in this continent right over here. So what is this area right here? Right, and you can see, now what about this place right here? What line would you see in the globe? The equator. So this is where the sun is most intense. The equator is where sunlight, it's where it's the hottest area, and it's the most intense sunlight. This is the desert area right here. And so they don't get very many clouds. It's very hot, very intense sunlight. So black skin gives you a protection from the sun. It's built-in sunscreen. And so the hottest area in the world has darker skin color. Go away from the equator, like down in South Africa. People in South Africa actually have, a lot of people have blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin, because South Africa right here is actually not that hot. It's far away from the equator. And going even further south, down here in South America, down in Chile, Argentina, you can see that people are lighter skinned because they're further away from the equator. Like going up to around Brazil, you can see people are dark skinned. Same thing up here. You can go from the equator this way too. You can see as you go north, it's lighter and lighter. You go over here, Texas, Canada, Alaska, you get wider and wider skin. And so that's for two reasons. So you want dark skin by the equator because it's sunscreen, but you want white skin around the poles because vitamin D is produced from sunlight. If you have dark skin and you're up north, you won't do as well, because dark skin up north will give you vitamin D deficiency, which can be very bad for you. So you have to take vitamin supplements if you live up north and you have dark skin. So that's why we see this happen. And then this shows you all the possible skin color shades, and that's due to the different genes. So the very top left picture shows all the genes recessive that gives you the palest skin possible. The very bottom picture, all the genes turned on, dominant genes, you get darkest skin color possible. So with different genes turned on or turned off, you get different shades of skin color. Question, Jordan? Okay, epistatic genes are genes that interfere with other genes. They turn other genes on or off. An albino person or albino animal has this happen, where a person who is albino, many times for humans, they're actually African American. They actually have dark skin. The genes are dark skin, but they have it shut off. So there's another gene that shuts off the melanin producing genes, and so they look very pale, and they have blonde hair, and the eyes have no pigment either because the epistatic gene has turned off this pigment making genes. So you can see this in rabbits, you can see it in this hedgehog. Sometimes animals also are albino for the same reason, where they have another gene that interferes with the melanin making genes. And usually they have red eyes, Because if you have any pigment in your eyes, you're just seeing the blood in your eyes. You know, you have naturally have blood in your eyes, but usually you're not aware of that because you have a pigment, you know, brown, blue, that counteracts the blood that you see in the eyes. Without any pigment, all you see is the blood. And that's why in pictures you might see red eyes. Have you ever noticed that before? You get a picture with red eyes? Why is that? Well, the camera flash hits your retina in the back of your eye where the blood is. And that's what the picture is picking up, is the blood in the back of your eye. That's why you have red eyes in pictures sometimes. So the camera flash is what produces red eyes sometimes. Without the camera flash, you don't get red eyes as often. Rabbits, that's very common in rabbits to be albino. So in albinism, all the genes that control pigment are shut off by a ABSAC gene. So for some animals like rabbits, it's very common to be albino. Others, it's very rare. Like an albino tiger is incredibly rare. But others, you can see like you can get a bunny like this very easily. They're very common.
So can that gene get passed on too?
That's right. Yeah. So for some animals, like for rabbits or for mice or rats, it's passed on very easily. But for others, like like tigers, it's not very commonly passed on.
If you're an albino, can you get a tan?
No, you can't. Yeah, you just burn. Yeah. So people who are true albinos have to be really careful. If they're out in the sunlight, they need to have an umbrella. They need to wear long sleeves because they can get burned very easily. They get cancer very easily from the sun.
Yeah. Isn't there like two types of albino? Like one like you can tell like blue eyes and like blue like brown hair.
Right, exactly. So some don't have red eyes, and some can have a little bit of skin color, like a little bit of hair color. Others have just white hair and red eyes. So yeah, there is a slight variance in the severity of albinism in certain people.
I had a friend who was like that. She had super light brown hair and like watery blue eyes.
Could she go outside? Would she have to have protection when she went outside?
Yeah, she could go outside, but she like put on like sunscreen.
Yeah, so that's the biggest concern with albinism, is just that you have to usually cover up. Lots of times they just don't go outside, or if they do, they wear long sleeves, they use an umbrella, they use a hat, because they know no protection of the sun at all. Like your melanin, Dominic. Melanin gives you protection. So the darker skin you have, the more sunscreen you have built into your skin. Without any sunscreen, your skin gets damaged very easily, and that gives you cancer. This is an example of a person with albinism. It's very common, again, for people who are Black to have albino traits. So they would have the genes for black skin and black hair, but those genes are turned off. And so instead they look pale, and their hair looks blonde, or sometimes even dark blonde to brown. Other times it's more severe, where they have no eye color and they have red eyes and no hair color. They look basically have white hair.
Can a Black family have an albino?
It does happen sometimes, yeah. There's even one case of people, Black parents had a baby with blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin. They actually gave birth to a white baby because they actually carry the genes for white skin. They didn't know about it, but they must have had an ancestor who was white at one time that gave the white genes to the family, but they were recessive traits. They were hidden in the family, but then they both had the genes for white skin, and they passed on to a child, and the child had white skin and blonde hair and blue eyes. So it does happen from time to time. Environment also affects the genotype. It affects the expression of the genes. So phenotype, what you see, what you observe as traits, is really a combination of your genes and your environment. So what that means is that, you know, there's genes that control your height, and the genes say you can be between a range of heights. So you might have a gene that gives you a height of between, you know, 5'8" to 5'11", and you have a possibility of anywhere between those two heights. If you were to eat really badly, not exercise, you might only be 5'8". If you eat well, stay active, you might be 5'11". So it's a combination of your genes, but also your choices and your environment and the food that you eat that will make you you. Skin color is the same way. You know, with skin color, you can be very pale, but if you go outside, you might tan somewhat, and you can have a range of skin color possibilities. Now, not everybody can. Some people who are very, very pale can't really tan, and they just burn outside. So it's not always the case. But for many people, it is the case where your choices do affect your skin color as well, to a certain extent. This can be really dramatic sometimes too. Like sea turtles themselves will change their gender based on their environment. So if you put the eggs of a sea turtle into warm water, they'll become female. The eggs in cold water will be male. This is more dramatic in clownfish. In a clownfish, they can actually change their gender when they're adults. So when a male clownfish loses their wife, the wife dies, then the male clownfish becomes a female and starts to lay eggs. So in Finding Nemo, when Marlin lost his wife, he would turn into a female and started having more babies at that point. There actually was an article that was really mad about Finding Nemo not being biologically accurate. They wanted to actually show an accurate portrayal of what clownfish did. And they said Finding Nemo should be, you know, showing the real life of clownfish and what actually would happen in a clownfish situation. But it'd be really dramatic, I think, and really scarring for kids to see that happen. But environment can change in dramatic ways sometimes. Frogs too, and fish can change their gender based on their environment. Chemicals in the water are affecting frogs and fish and making them more female than normal, which is concerning. Because the medicine in the water, is birth control, for example, is in our water supply now because people throw it away, and that goes into our water supply. And so animals are affected by that. And fish and frogs are affected by that. And so we do see even dramatic changes in the population. So gender sometimes is affected by your environment. I mentioned height. Height is an example of a phenotype that affects strongly your environment. So pollution in the air, your diet, activity level will all affect your diet, will all affect your height. So all those things that you do will affect how tall you will be to a certain extent. Now, there's a limit, of course. It's a range of possibilities.
Do we know why warmer water makes sea turtles female?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the environment actually will change how your genes work. So the genes can be turned off or turned on through chemicals, and some chemicals are active with certain temperatures. So if you have a certain temperature range, above a certain temperature, chemicals will be active, which will turn genes on, which makes that turtle a female. If it's too cold, those chemicals turn off, they're not active, the genes turn off, and they're a male instead.
Does that give them any advantage by being able to do that?
They probably do. I mean, that's usually what happens with genes, is they usually have some kind of advantage. And so I would imagine that warmer water females might do better. I'm not for sure about that, but it's usually what happens with genes, is that's usually why we see changes in genes based on that, but I'm not for sure about why that would be. I should look it up and see. But generally that is the case. All right, so that's 7.2. For today, work in your book on those questions. That's on page 195. Do 1 through 6 on page 195.